Dallas Week Thursday on Birds 365. You got McCormack, McMullen, and McDonald. We got the JM to join the fray. That would be John Machota from the Athletic Cowboys beat reporter who comes on whenever we need a Cowboy perspective. Mr. Machota, what kind of hat you got on there?
Oh, it's a Travis Matthew. It's I don't know. I think it's supposed to be golf gear. I don't golf. I just like the hat. And It's got an M on it, I guess. So.
I got a bunch of golf stuff. I used to golf, not anymore. I still have it though. I enjoy some golf. So I got it.
I wish I knew who Travis Matthews was. Who's Travis Matthews? I thought he was a country singer. No?
As far as I know, he makes golf gear, and there's a shop not too far from my place. And
nice.
I like the hat, and so I went with it.
There we go. There we go. It's about style first and foremost, John.
Right.
And style points have been a big thing here in Philadelphia because the Eagles keep winning games, but Eagles fans often wring their hands because they're not the prettiest things in the world. Cowboys, I say, man, when they got their A game, boy, they look like $100, but when they don't, I don't know. It seems to be tough to persevere for them. Is that how you would describe the Cowboys?
I would, yeah. I mean, when they've won big in some games that, when the games are over, you're sitting there thinking, you're writing your story in the press box and you're like, how much do I buy into this? Is this team really on this level? Because if they're playing like this is a Super Bowl contender, no doubt. And then they lay that egg against Arizona. And then there's all that hype going in the Niners game. And this is a Niners team that there's no way you would sleep on. I mean, they've ended your playoffs the last 2 years. And then to just get blown out 42-10 like that really rocked everything there. And to a point where it made me wonder, how are they going to rebound from this? And they have rebounded well their previous 2 games, but they're not on the level of teams like the Niners or like the Eagles. And so that's why this game, very similar build up to that Niners game. A lot of talk about, how big this game is because these are 2 teams that could potentially see each other again in the playoffs. Obviously the NFC East on the line. And so I'm fascinated to see what kind of team you don't even have to tell me about the whole game. I want to see the first few series, because in the first few series against San Francisco, you were like, oh, no, this Niners team's on a different level, to the point where the most surprising thing to me that's happened all season is the Niners losing these last 3 games, because that Niners team, the way they dominated the Cowboys, I was like, well, you can might as well just put them right in the NFC Championship game, probably against the Eagles. Winner goes to play, maybe the Chiefs. But the last 3 weeks, it makes you think, okay, well, maybe it's a week-to-week league.
Yeah. All right, couple of things I want to specifically, boxes I want to check with you, because during the offseason, last we spoke, you did the Cowboy preview with us, and we thank you for that. Cowboys got credit during the offseason for addressing some needs. Needed a better second option at wide receiver, went out, acquired it. Needed an upgrade at the other cornerback across from your all-pro corner. Oops, he got hurt, but did go out and fill that void. So people were giving him credit for him, and I was too. But I thought they had a couple of step backs, and I thought people were skipping over those. So I need you to check the boxes on the 3 guys, or the 3 areas where I thought the Cowboys were a little bit in question. Kicker. I said, wait a minute, they're going to bring in a guy from the USFL? He's kicking in empty stadiums, and now they're going to have him kicking in the Palace in Dallas under all that pressure? Are you kidding me? Kicker's been okay, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's far exceeded expectations. I mean, I just go back to the start of training camp. We're out in Oxnard, California, and we're outside and there's a little bit of wind, and it looked like it was going to be one of these deals where at that time when camp started, I would have felt pretty comfortable telling you that the Cowboys would have at least 2 and maybe 3 kickers during this upcoming season. And Brandon Aubrey has just taken it to another level where, heck, even the first game, trots out there, first extra point, misses it, and you're just thinking, oh, this is Brett Maher all over again. Like, they didn't find the answer at all. This is a team that needed to address this in the draft or in free agency. And this is going to be something that we're going to rip them for. Hasn't missed a kick since. No. And including last week, man, he hit this 58-yarder, and it would have been good from at least 70. And so, he's completely locked in. It kind of just speaks to just how odd it is in terms of finding kickers. And it's really made me think a lot about Justin Tucker and Adam Vinatieri, undrafted guys that are legendary. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, to get a guy like that, you're going to have to draft him. And so if this continues to work out and Aubrey keeps playing well, then hats off to John Fossil. John Fossil went to one of his USFL games, not wearing any Cowboys gear, basically doing a scouting mission, really liked Brandon a lot and brought him in. And man, that's been, of everything on the Cowboys roster, nothing, I don't think anything's exceeded expectations as much as he has.
Real quick, I got to jump in before. Yeah, I always tell everybody, John, I'm in awe whenever I see Justin Tucker kick. He was here for joint practices. I'm like, what is this guy? This guy's like different than anything I've ever seen. The ball just explodes off his foot. But I digress. I had to say.
All right. The next box I need you to check for me was tight end, because I thought they were going to miss Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz was the safety net, the valve for Dak Prescott, and I didn't know they had enough left in the tank there. I thought they overdrafted Schooner in the second round, but Ferguson's done a pretty nice job. How would you rate their tight end play after they're deciding not to re-sign Dalton Schultz?
I'd say it's been solid. I think it would be better if they still had Dalton Schultz, but I get what they're doing. They're trying to develop the next Dalton Schultz. And I think Ferguson can certainly do that. Ferguson is further along in his career being in year 2 than where Dalton Schultz was when he was with the Cowboys. He kind of, it was until like pretty much his 3rd year until where he started taking the step to where he became that safety blanket for Dak Prescott. I think Ferguson's getting there. The next step is to have that type of a game, though, against the Eagles in a big game where, it's a tight game. You need to make some big throws in big moments. That's what we have to see from Jake Ferguson and know that, he is fully taken that over, but they don't feel any differently about it. They like the moves that they made at the position, but up to this point, it hasn't been a position that's wowed you.
All right, and last one for me. That's were the 3 things I had. Tight end, kicker, Mike McCarthy, the play caller. Both John and I are kind of in the minority here in Philadelphia that we think McCarthy's an okay coach. I just didn't think he was a great play caller in Green Bay, and I thought they were mistaken handing him the keys to that before the year started. John, and you did a good job describing the peak and valley nature of the Cowboys so far. When they're great, they're great. When they're bad, they're god-awful. Look out below. Would you describe McCarthy's play calling to this point the same way?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's been what we kind of expected. I don't think anybody was or shouldn't have been expecting all of a sudden just this, well, where did all of this come from? This looks nothing like anything that Mike McCarthy's run before. He made it pretty clear in the offseason what he wanted to do. He wanted to run the ball more, lean on their defense. The strength of this team is their defense. And up to this point, that's what they've tried to do. They haven't run it well. They're only averaging 3.9 yards a carry. That's far too low for them. So it's forced them to turn a little bit more to the passing game. But in terms of, putting up some huge numbers and that, I don't think anybody should have been expecting that. So up to this point, outside of that Niners game, it's hard to be too critical of what he's been as an offensive coordinator. But I'll say this, games like Sunday against the Eagles, January games in the playoffs, that's where it'll ultimately be decided how good of a play caller he was. And if it was the right move to move on from Kellen Moore and give him the play calling.
All right, John, before we get to that defense, got to bring up the quarterback. I mean, Dak Prescott is one of those guys for me. I'm a Dak guy. I think he's a really good quarterback. There's a lot of people who think he isn't, and I don't know what they're watching at times. Here in Philadelphia, it's kind of understandable because they just don't want him to be good, but he is. Talking to Brian Johnson, the Eagles offensive coordinator, who was his college coach back at Mississippi State, and he only has tremendous regard for Dak Prescott as a quarterback. What's missing? Why are there's so many people? I guess we should know. We see the same thing with Jalen Hurts here, but why do you think there are so many people who look at Dak Prescott and say, that guy's not an elite quarterback? Because to me, top 10 is, I don't know if you want to use whatever adjective you want to use, but he's a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know I've never been one that thought he was top 5, but I've always thought he's top 10 quarterback throughout his entire time. I'll say that the biggest things are longest tenured starting quarterback in the NFL with the same team, 8 years. So you have a large sample size. It's the Dallas Cowboys, week in, week out, playing well, playing bad. They're always a main topic. And so when you're the quarterback of that franchise and you haven't won a Super Bowl, you haven't been to an NFC Championship game, you're going to get more blame than anyone because of that. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit overrated, the criticism on him. But I'll say this, after that Niners game, with how much buildup there was to that game and how poorly he played, in my time covering this team, his entire time as their starting quarterback, that was the lowest I felt like his approval rating was. It was even where you were getting your typical Dak supporters that were kind of sitting there going, you know what, maybe this isn't the future. But the way that he has responded the last 2 games, it's typical Dak. Like he always seems to find a way to bounce back. The issue is that he's got to do it in January, and that's what he'll ultimately be judged on. And if he doesn't, then all the criticism will continue. But throughout this entire time, I've never sensed any wavering from the Cowboys front office. You know, it's fan-based stuff. It's stuff like, you know, the news shows, the different sports talk shows and stuff like that drives it. But within the building, they haven't wavered. But they need to see more from him. Obviously, they need him to go on a big playoff run. And we'll see if he'll be able to do that, in January. But I get why he's criticized to a certain extent, but I also think it's overblown because it's the Cowboys.
And you kind of hit the nail on the head the way that I look at Dak. We're kind of in a position like that here in Philadelphia with Joel Embiid. The regular season is irrelevant. Joel Embiid can win another MVP this year. And guess what? If he doesn't come up big in the playoffs, he sucks. And the same thing with Dak. He could be the top-rated quarterback in the NFL. He gets bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Means nothing. He could be the 18th ranked quarterback. But if he gets on a run and goes to the Super Bowl, he's Roger Staubach. It kind of stinks for those guys who have to get through the entire regular season knowing that what they do is borderline irrelevant. It all comes down to what they're going to do in the postseason, right?
Yeah, and there's part of me being originally from Detroit that sees a little bit of the Matthew Stafford there where you're like, yeah, I mean, if you let him go, don't think he's going to be on the streets. He'll get a job somewhere. And man, what a story. And that would be typical sports. The Cowboys move on from Dak. He goes to another team and then it finally has the ultimate success with that other team. And just how Cowboys fans would be kicking themselves like, okay, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. The other thing is social media and that. I mean, everything I just feel like is dissected far beyond. I was joking around with a friend of mine that covers a team that I bet you there's people that they get to those Kansas City Chiefs games 5-6 hours early, tailgating in the parking lot, complaining about something Mahomes did, and the rest of us are sitting there.
You're right.
Going,
You're right.
You're so fortunate to have him.
Well, look at the reaction in Minnesota this week. Cousins would probably be the biggest guy, and now that they don't have him, they're like panic stricken. They're like, "Oh my god!" I mean, there's certain guys, and Matthew Stafford is probably the best example because for years I would say that guy's good. People around the league tell you how good he is. He's been with a bad team, bad organization. And he got to prove it. He got to go to the right situation, win a Super Bowl. Same guy. And I would argue better in Detroit than he was with the Rams when he won the Super Bowl. But yeah, kind of doesn't matter unless that philosophy for quarterbacks is skewed pretty poorly, I would say, when people judge him only on Super Bowls, because so much has to go right to win a Super Bowl. And we've seen that here in Philadelphia. Tremendous team, came up just short, and everybody's, the expectations, John, are just so out of whack. And that's what the Eagles are dealing with now. They got to win every week. And not only do they have to win every week, they got to get style points. Jody knows. People are complaining all that. They've been either number one or tied for number one record-wise in the NFL since week 1 of last year. So 26 consecutive weeks. And if they lose to the Cowboys, the sky will be falling, my friend. It will be falling. And that's just the nature of it. And the Cowboys have that, I think, a little bit more as America's team and all that kind of stuff. Now, Michael Irvin said something I thought was astute this week, and this is a game of 11s. Either Micah Parsons gets home or A.J. Brown's going to kill the Cowboys. You think that's correct?
I think it's possible. Certainly, it wouldn't surprise me if that potentially happened. I look at it more along the lines of the Arizona Cardinals game that the Cowboys lost, because the Cardinals do some similar things that the Eagles do, and the Eagles have much better players doing that. And so the thing that killed the Cowboys in that game was the running game. It was the Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence maybe being a little overzealous getting to the quarterback because that's their game. And then the quarterback's leaking out for a huge run, or, they're doing some type of misdirection play where your aggressiveness is used against you. The discipline of those guys up front will be the thing that I'm most focused on with the Cowboys edge rushers. So yeah, no, if they're not getting home to Hurts, those receivers are a serious problem. There's no question about that. But Hurts's legs, I think, are the thing that I'll be focused on a little bit more.
He's banged up. He didn't run at all against Washington, basically. So he's hurting with his knees, so that could help the Cowboys. But how have they sort of persevered with the Trayvon Diggs injury? Because that's a big one.
Yeah, they've been, so the draft when they took Micah Parsons, they had a top 10 pick, and the focus was all on they had to get another top corner to pair with Trayvon. And so they wanted Surtain, they wanted J.C. Horn, and both get picked right before him. So they have to settle for Micah Parsons, and the rest is history. But they got very fortunate. They had been, so in the second round in that draft, they draft Kelvin Joseph, completely swing and miss there. But they ended up finding Jerron Bland as a 5th round pick, and he's been the answer for them there. I mean, just 3 pick sixes, just has a knack for the ball, and is just so unlike typical playmaking corners in terms of his demeanor. So hard to pull a decent quote out of him. Doesn't really like to talk. Really keeps to himself. No trash talk during the games. But he's been huge for them, and he was their nickel corner with Trayvon, but with Trayvon out, they moved him to the outside, and they really haven't skipped a beat. I mean, they've been the NFL's best team at taking the ball away the last 2 years. And with what Bland's doing, they're right in that mix again for a 3rd consecutive year. So surprisingly, it hasn't been felt as much as maybe we thought when Diggs went down. But I will say with the trade deadline, there was some thought of, well, why don't they go get another corner to make up for that in case, because where they are at corner right now, they're good starting wise, but if they were to lose one of those starters, it might get pretty thin quick.
All right. Want to turn the attention from coverage to the ability to stop the run, which it's always nice when you got a corner who can come up and make a tackle. The Cowboys and the Eagles, a little different in matching up their two defense. Eagles are different than the team they were last year. Last year, they were great against the pass. Number 1 in the NFL against the pass. They could be run on when Jordan Davis wasn't in the lineup. This year, they're number 1 in the NFL against the run, but they're giving up a whole bunch of yards against the pass, including Sam Howell picking them apart for 2 games this year. Cowboys are the opposite. They're very good at at stopping the pass, but they have been a little leaky against the run this year. How will they match up against the Eagles? We've seen the Eagles, when the other team dares them to run the football, say, oh, yeah, we'll run it down your throat. Are the Cowboys ready to come in and stop the Eagles if the Eagles dedicate to moving the football on the ground on Sunday?
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, defensive tackle is a spot where, they drafted Mozzie Smith in the 1st round. He hasn't really met the expectations right now. They still have hopes of him in the future being that guy. But that's why he was drafted in the 1st round, is because they knew they needed help stopping the run in the middle. And so Jonathan Hankins has been good. Oso Odighizuwa has been good. Neville Gallimore's been solid. But that defensive tackle spot, it can be vulnerable against the run. And so that will be an interesting thing to keep track of. But I sense in this game, though, if they can, I think they'll be okay against the run. It's really, like I said, with the Hurts thing leaking out, maybe taking a play and turning it into something bigger than it was, or if they're not getting pressure on the quarterback, throwing down the field. But yeah, on the other side of it, I would be surprised if the Cowboys get their running game going against this Eagles defense. Their running game it hasn't been there all season long. They've wanted to try and establish it, and they've had no luck at all.
It's funny going back to what you said about Surtain and Horn, the Eagles and the Cowboys. That's the 2 players the Eagles wanted, Patrick Surtain and J.C. Horn. Although for them, I think they wanted Horn first, Surtain second. And they had to settle for Devontae Smith. So things tend to work out sometimes, not all the times, but certainly for the Cowboys and the Eagles in that draft. you know, third down, the Eagles are the best team in football, and have been. That's where, to me, Jalen Hurts kind of sets himself apart. Not only the tush push nonsense, but extending plays when needed to be. And he just tends to deflate teams who do a good job on defense, extends things, schoolyard type plays. And when you do everything right, it kind of gets demoralizing for a defense. And I think that's where Jalen Hurts kind of impacts the game most. Cowboys are top 10 on third down defense. To me, that's where the game is going to be won. What do the Cowboys do well, do you think, on third down defense? Dan Quinn, I'm sure, is a big part of that.
The biggest thing is if they're able to stop the run and get to third down, it allows them to pin their ears back up front. And that's by far this team's greatest strength, is that it's not, Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence get a lot of the headlines, but it is really a deep crew. Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong. They got a kid in Sam Williams that was a second-round pick last year that they just haven't even been able to get him on the field as much. So they actually have him helping on special teams now because he is a talented player. So they come in waves with their pass rush. I think that's one of the biggest reasons that it's not even just the getting home and getting sacks. It's the pressures they get and how it forces other teams into turnovers. That's when they're at their best. That's why this team wants to play with a lead. That they want you to be in these situations where you got to come from behind, that you are in third and long situations so that they can, unleash their pass rushers on you. But that's easier said than done against a team as talented as the Eagles. So I would say that that's been their greatest strength is getting that pass rush, and then having that, if they're not getting home, then they're forcing turnovers. I think that's the biggest thing.
John and I were just talking about this, borderline debating it before you came on the air this morning. As per what the Cowboys will do overall with their passing game. We watched Sam Howell go quick draw McGraw on them last week and just pick them apart. No pressure from the defensive line, no ability, too soft on the back end, and he just threw the ball wherever he wanted to. That's not the Cowboy offense. Dak isn't a 1 or 2 step drop, get the ball out of his hands as soon as possible kind of guy. They have faith in their offensive line, the schemes, and the type of routes that they run. But you did see the Eagles get picked apart by a guy who got it out quick. How do you balance what we usually do, and we usually do pretty damn well, and what we really believe we can do against the defense we're facing? How did the Cowboys balance those two things this week? What do you think their offense is overall going to look like over 60 minutes of football on Sunday?
Well, even though it isn't working, they will try and run it early, because I do think they don't want to see their defense on the field all game against the Eagles offense, just slowly going up and down the field and gassing them. Mike McCarthy will not want that. So they're going to try and establish the run. I personally don't think it's going to work. I think the Eagles are going to get out to a lead, and it's going to force the Cowboys to pass more than, I look at like last year's game when the Cowboys won with Dak. He threw, I think, 35 times. That's the type of game I think he's going to have here. And it has been clicking with him and CeeDee Lamb the last 2 games. It was really bad against the Niners. It's the most frustrated I've ever seen CeeDee Lamb. It just basically he's the clear number 1 option on this team. To be honest with you, if I'm game planning for the Cowboys, line 1, take away CeeDee Lamb. Put 2, 3 guys, whatever, make anybody else beat you. But I know that's also easier said than done. I see a lot of passing between Dak and CD, and then if they try and take him away or they're successful in it, Brandon Cooks has come on lately as well, and it might lead to where they need another pass catcher, whether it's Michael Gallup or Jalen Tolbert or Jake Ferguson, the tight end, to step up. But they'll want to run. I just don't think it's going to work, and it's going to force them to go through the air, because that's what it's going to take to have a chance to win the game. And going off of the last 2 games, I think Dak's in a good spot, rhythm-wise, mentality, confidence. But of course, this is going to be a much better defense, a much better team than they faced the last 2 weeks.
At John Machota, make sure you follow John on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days. He does a tremendous job covering the Dallas Cowboys. By the way, is this the one day the Cowboys aren't the biggest story in the Dallas area? World Series champion Texas Rangers, for those who don't know, play in Arlington. So are they on the back page for once, John?
Yeah, in Dallas. Yeah, sure. But I again, not being from Dallas, I've always said, there's obviously diehard Cowboys fans in Dallas. I mean, they're passionate bunch, but it's really about when you go out of town, like when you go to Philly and you have all these Cowboys fans, and it's just how big that brand is outside of it. But in Texas today, yeah, there's no question. I'm a little disappointed, to be honest with you. I wanted it to be Rangers, Phillies. I wanted it to go 7 games, so that 7th game would have been Saturday night. Then you have Cowboys.
Yeah, that
Eagles
would have been cool. That would have been very cool. Yeah.
That's exactly what happened here last year when it was the Astros and the Phillies.
Yeah.
Sure enough, they were playing the Texans that given weekend.
Well, I got to get one football one. I just wanted to hear about the Rangers. Give them congratulations, by the way. That's a tremendous run for them. But Jody and I have been talking about this because the Eagles got Kevin Byard before the trade deadline, 2-time Pro Bowl safety. Now, from the Cowboys' perspective, Jerry Jones always says, we're good. We don't need to do. And for all his reputation, he's generally very conservative. On paper, coming into the season, you would say safety wasn't a big problem for them. But those guys haven't played up to their reputation. And they have 3 guys. Is that fair to say? And also the receivers after CD. What happened to Michael Gallup and Brandon Cooks? Those are the 2 positions where I see some guys underachieving.
Well, with Gallup, it's pretty clear that knee injury really set him back from 2 years ago. He just hasn't been the same player. And I don't even know if it's necessarily a physical side of it. I think the mental side of it. I don't know that he's 100% gained that confidence back in his ability that he had before that knee injury. And it's pretty evident in his play. And he's, it was the time when they signed him that they thought he'd be their number 2. And he's clearly their number 3 receiver right now. Cooks, it was kind of a slow start, but he's picked it up recently. I would be surprised if he's not a factor in this game. And if he's not, then the Eagles will definitely win. They're going to need more than CeeDee Lamb. So it is funny you say the thing about Byard, though, because that's the thing down here. It's the Cowboys fans look at Howie Roseman and what the Eagles do, and it's whenever they have a hole, they go out and they fill it. And the Cowboys haven't been like that. And that's supposed to be the reputation of the team. And so to see them make that move right before the trade deadline and the Cowboys not make any type of move, that doesn't sit well at all, especially when your biggest rival is constantly, when there's an issue, they go and they're very aggressive about it. And you'd think with Jerry Jones' reputation, it'd be the same way. And really over these last 4, 5, 6 years, he's been much more conservative when it comes to adding players to the roster and leaning more into this draft and develop that, frankly, I never thought Jerry Jones would become. So we'll see how that works out. The safety position, I would say, I mean, they've been good, but no, Jaron Kearse hasn't played as well as he would be hoping, or they would be hoping. So maybe this is a game where he kind of breaks out, but it's the best safety group that they've had in such a long time that it's difficult to be too critical, because we've seen bare bones where they had the worst safety group probably in the entire league for a while.
Yeah.
Here's where I'll take that question John just asked you to the next level. How would plays here on Birds 365 with McMullen, Machota, and McDonald is one thing. How it plays with the Cowboy fans and talk radio and how it plays on talk radio here in Philadelphia with the fan base. He goes, no. How did it play in the locker room for the Cowboys? Eagles go out, as you said, fill a hole. Cowboys go out and do nothing. And the owner was on record at the time going, yeah, we won't make any calls. If somebody calls us, we'll pick up the phone, but we're not. We don't have to aggressively pursue anything. It's confidence, but it's also a little cocky. How did it play in the locker room? The players just buying into Jerry's line of BS? We're good. We don't have any holes. How to play with the players?
Up to this point, I haven't heard anything negative about it, because I will say this: they do have depth on defense of some younger players that, if they have to step up, they believe in them, and those players believe in themselves that they can take a bigger role if needed. I think on the outside, fans, media, and such maybe aren't as confident as they are inside the locker room about those situations. I think the biggest thing, if you look at this Cowboys team, the biggest issue is the offensive line health, and then just even coming in the season, their depth just isn't great. And this is a team that's had a good offensive line for the better part of the last decade, and it just isn't on that level. They just have not stayed healthy, and they haven't been nearly as effective. But the issue is just how often are notable offensive linemen traded at the deadline. That was their biggest need, but it's tough to get a deal done for an offensive line and then have that player step in and be a factor immediately. It just isn't a position group that happens very often. That's the one area where I could see.
That's where
the team looking around.
Cleveland went to Jacksonville. That
True.
was yeah, and only for a 6th-round pick. So and he's a pretty good player. So but I heard he wants to play tackle, so maybe that complicates things.
I mean, we're not supposed to project right now what teams are going to do in the draft because it doesn't make sense. But I'm telling you, I'd be stunned if the Cowboys' 1st-round pick isn't an offensive lineman. It's the biggest area of need.
Fair enough. Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles. Safe travels, John, by the way, up here. I will see you hopefully in the press box. So big one. And this is, by the way, Murder's Row stretch for the Eagles. This is it, man. If they can get through this stretch, they're going to have the #1 seed. And if teams have to come back to Lincoln Financial Field, we've already seen it twice, Super Bowl 52, Super Bowl 57. It's probably Eagles are probably going to be in a good spot. So this is a big game, to say the least.
Absolutely.
JM, great stuff. Appreciate you jumping in with us today. Thank you very much. John, I'll see you down in the press box on Sunday. Yeah, they might not feed you as well as they do down there in
No,
Jerry.
nobody feeds
Mullen
as
always
well
comes
as
back
Jerry.
and goes,
Oh my
gotta
God.
give Jerry the props. He takes
I
care
will
of us in the press
never.
box.
I always stick up for Jerry.
Yeah,
But
he
first
does.
of all, John, I was talking to one of the ushers there. Well, the facility is phenomenal, but you know, Jerry tailors their suit jackets for them. The ushers, the guy's class. The guy's 100% class. He might be a nut. He might not do stuff on the football side, but that spread is unbelievable. You guys are spoiled.
I'll agree with you with that. The one difference, though, I will say is that because you mentioned about the Eagles potentially getting, home field in the playoffs, because of all of that stuff, I just don't see a time when you could ever create that environment there. You know,
and it's too big. There's
Yeah.
too many people. It's too big. But yeah, I digress.
Johnny, great stuff. Appreciate you coming on board. Thanks much. It should be a good one on Sunday. I think it's going to be competitive on Sunday. Enjoy, and we'll be looking forward to reading you in The Athletic come Monday.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. These are the games you live for.
John Machota from The Athletic here with us on Birds 365. All right, good dude, and knows his Cowboy stuff inside and out.
Yeah,
All
Jerry, man. Whew. Yeah, I'm telling you. Whew.
He does.
Off the field, people can take a lot of lessons from him.
Handles ancillary things very well. He is the de facto general manager, and that's still a question/issue, but he's not afraid to, around the edges, put up and take care of people. All right. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. That's Mac Birds 365. Come back. I got a question or two for John before we punch up Jeff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com. He's going to join us coming up in about 15 minutes. So keep you there on Birds 365.